Emily Anstis, Southend Diving. Elodie Bigham, Decorum Diving Club. Lana Cooper, Southampton Diving Academy. Annabelle Bostock, Aberdeen Diving Club. Poppy Rice, Southend Diving. Jasmine Orrell, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Kayla Segan, Southampton Diving Academy. Rain Downer, Southend Diving. Jess Wilson, Edinburgh Diving Club. Evie Royal, Plymouth Diving Club. Lois Fell Cohen, Southend Diving. Lexi Davis, Plymouth Diving Club. Sadie Stratford, Southend Diving. Megan Norton, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Isla Grace Henderson, Edinburgh Diving Club. Naya Sogat, Albatross Diving Club Reading. Samantha Barr, Southampton Diving Academy. Sophie Neculai, Edinburgh Diving Club. Poppy Reed, Edinburgh Diving Club. Hannah Hopkinson, Amersham Swimming Club. Hannah Chung, Southampton Diving Academy. Sophia Granton Crowe, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Eva Lang, Plymouth Diving Club. Poppy Jones, Plymouth Diving Club. Artesina Kontopoulou, Sandwell Diving Club. Sophie Uminski, Decorum Diving Club. Georgina Seath, Tunbridge Wells Diving Club. Daisy Dennison, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Jade Hendry, Aberdeen Diving Club. Amelia Leslie, Aberdeen Diving Club. Toby Fayomi, Cambridge Dive Team. And Erin O'Neill, Southend Diving.
And welcome our competitors in the female Group A 1 metre event. Sophia West, Edinburgh Diving Club. Ailey Carr, Sandwell Diving Club. Lacey May Patterson, Manchester Aquatic Centre. Hannah Ashdown, Albatross Diving Club Reading. Delphina Thomas, Tunbridge Wells Diving Club. Sky Lauk, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Zora Palmer, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Erin Healy, Plymouth Diving Club. Rose McKay, Plymouth Diving Club. Amy Robertson, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Ruby Taylor Ross, Dive London Aquatics. Anna Fisher, City of Bradford Esprit. Scarlett Hallam, Decorum Diving Club. Emma Buckley, Amersham Swimming Club. Damani Washington Scott, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Isabel Geary, Southampton Diving Academy. Quinn Kettler, Dive London Aquatics Club. Anna Duthie, Aberdeen Diving Club. Imogen Fitzsimmons, Southampton Diving Academy. Tegan Fuchs, Star Diving Club Guildford. Tilly Rowlinson, Decorum Diving Club. Maddie Elliott, Plymouth Diving Club. Chloe Struck, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Abby Hindle, City of Bradford Esprit. Eva O'Reilly, Star Diving Club Guildford. Jessica Island, City of Sheffield Diving Club. And Claire Kettler, Dive London Aquatics Club. Competitors, if you would like to get yourselves ready, and we will get this event underway as soon as possible. Can we have judges to seats, please? Can we have judges to seats, please? Thank you.
And to announce the officials on the female Group B 3 metre competition, we have our referee, Roger Page. We have Judge 1, Sophie Bolton. Judge 2, Lexi Bushnell. Judge 3, Steve Jackson. Judge 4, Thomas Screeton. And Judge 5, Kim Young.
And on the 1 metre, our referee is Emily Saunders. And Judge 1, we have Matt Pipe. Judge 2, Tommy Hawkins. Judge 3, Julie Bassano. Judge 4, Matthew Guerin. And Judge 5, Mark Jones.
And with the referee's permission on 3 metres, we will get started. Thank you. Our first diver on 3 metres, Elizabeth Marshall, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, piped. Hold the boards, sorry. Hold the boards.
Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
Permission again, read out. Yeah,
And can I ask for the referee's permission again on 3 meters, please? Thank you. I'll re-announce our first diver, Elizabeth Marshall, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, pint.
And do we have the referee's permission on 1 meter? Thank you very much. And our first diver, Sophia West, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Five, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5. Regan Raffel, Southend Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Ailey Cow, Sandwell Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5. Maya Richards, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. Lacey May Patterson, Manchester Aquatic Centre, forward dive, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 4. Martha Ticehurst, Plymouth Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Hannah Ashdown, Albatross Diving Club Reading, inward dive, piked.
5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Emily Anstis, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Delphina Thomas, Tunbridge Wells Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Elodie Bigham, Decorum Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Skylarks, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 6.5, 6, 6, 4. Lana Cooper, Southampton Diving Academy, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. Zara Palmer, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Annabelle Bostock, Aberdeen Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pikes.
4.5, 5, 4, 5, 4.5. Erin Healy, Plymouth Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 5, 5, 5.5. Poppy Rice, Southend Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, pikes.
6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Rose McCabe, Plymouth Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. Jasmine Orrell, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pikes.
5.5, 6, 6, 7, 6.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 6.
Amy Robertson, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Kayla Segan, Southampton Diving Academy, forward 1.5 somersaults, pikes.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Ruby Taylor Ross, Dive London Aquatics, back dive, pike.
5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Rain Downer, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, pikes.
6, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Anna Fisher, City of Bradford Esprit, inward dive, piked.
6, 5, 6, 5, 5. Jess Wilson, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, piked.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Scarlett Helen, Decorum Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Evie Royal, Plymouth Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
7, 6.5, 7, 7, 6. Emma Buckley, Amersham Swimming Club, forward dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5. Lois Fell Cohen, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Dimani Washington Scott, City of Sheffield Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Lexi Davis, Plymouth Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Isabel Geary, Southampton Diving Academy, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Sadie Stratford, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4, 5.5, 5, 5, 5. Queen Kettler, Dive London Aquatics, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 5, 6, 4.5, 5. Megan Norton, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5. Anna Duthie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
4.5, 4, 4, 5, 4.5. Isla Grace Henderson, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, piked.
7, 7, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Imogen Fitzsimmons, Southampton Diving Academy, inward dive, piked.
6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Naya Sogut, Albatross Diving Club, Reading. Forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Tegan Fuchs, Star Diving Club, Guildford, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5. Samantha Barr, Southampton Diving Academy. Forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
7.5, 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7. Tilly Rowlinson, Decorum Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Sophie Neculi, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Maddie Elliott, Plymouth Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5, 4, 5.5, 3.5, 4. Poppy Reed, Edinburgh Diving Club, reverse dive, piked.
6, 7, 6, 6, 6. Chloe Strutt, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5.
5.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5.
Hannah Hopkinson, Amersham Swimming Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Abby Hindle, City of Bradford Esprit, inward dive, piked.
5, 3.5, 4, 5, 4. Hannah Chung, Southampton Diving Academy, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Eva O'Reilly, Star Diving Club, Guildford, inward dive, piked.
6, 5, 5, 6, 4. Sophia Granton Crow, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6.5, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5.
6, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 5.
Jessica Ireland, City of Sheffield Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
Eva Lang, Plymouth Diving Club, back dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 7, 6.5, 7. Claire Kettler, Dive London Aquatics, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
5, 5, 6, 5, 4.5. Poppy Jones, Plymouth Diving Club, inward dive pikes.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5. On to round 2 on 1 metre. Sophia, inward dive pike.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Artesina Contopoulou, Sandwell Diving Club, inward dive pikes.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Ailey, forward dive pike.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4. Sophie Uminski, Decorum Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults pikes.
4.5, 6, 5, 5, 5. Lacey May, back dive pike.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Georgina Seath, Tunbridge Wells Diving Club, inward dive pikes.
5, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 6. Hannah, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
6, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5. Daisy Dennison, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults pikes.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Delphina, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
We need to hold 3 metre, please. Hold 3 metre, thank you.
Five and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Sky, inward dive, piked. 5, 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Zara, inward dive, piked.
Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. We have a technical hitch.
Five and a half, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Erin, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Judges on 3 metre, could you put your scores in for Daisy, please? 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Jade Hendry, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward dive piked.
Rose, forward 1.5 somersaults pike. 4, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5. Amy, inward dive pike.
6, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5. Amelia Leslie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward dive Pikes.
6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5.
5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5.
Ruby, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Toby Fayomi, Cambridge Dive Team, back dive Pikes.
5.5, 6, 5, 5.5, 5. Anna, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6. Erin O'Neill, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults Pikes.
6.5, 6, 7, 6.5, 6. Scarlett, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4. We're on to round 2. Elizabeth, reverse dive Pikes.
4, 5.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Emma, inward dive piked.
4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Regan, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 6.5. Damani, back dive piked.
5, 6, 5, 4, 4.5. Maya, inward 1.5 somersaults Pikes.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 4, 5.5, 4.5. Isabel, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
6, 7, 6, 5, 4.5. Martha, back dive Pikes.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Quinn, back dive piked.
4.5, 4, 5, 3.5, 5.5. Emily, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Anna, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4.5, 4, 4, 4, 3. Elodie, reverse dive Pikes.
4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Imogen, back dive, half twist, straight.
5, 4, 4.5, 4, 5. Lana, inward dive, piked.
5, 4, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Tegan, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked. 7, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Tilly, inward dive, piked.
6, 6.5, 6, 5, 5.5. Annabelle, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Maddie, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5. Poppy, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Chloe, back dive, piked.
2, 1, 2, 1.5, 1.5. Jasmine, inward dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Abby, back dive, piked.
6, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. Kayla, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 6, 5, 5, 5. Evo, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked. 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Jessica, back dive, piked.
5.5, 4, 5.5, 4.5, 5. Rain, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 6, 6, 6. Claire, back dive, piked.
6.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Jess, reverse dive, piked.
4.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. On to round 3 on 1 metre. Sophia, back dive, piked.
4.5, 4, 4, 4, 4. Evie, back dive, piked.
5.5, 4.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Ailey, back dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 6.5, 5, 5.5. Lois, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 5, 5, 5.5. Lacey May, inward dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Lexi, forward, 1.5, somersaults, piked.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 5, 4.5. Hannah, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Sadie, forward, 1.5, somersaults, piked.
4, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Delphina, back dive, straight.
6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7. Megan, inward, 1.5, somersaults, piked.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Sky, back dive, piked.
5, 4, 5, 4, 4. Isla Grace, reverse dive, piked.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5. Zara, back dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Naya, inward, 1.5, somersaults, piked.
5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Erin, back dive, piked.
4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 4. Samantha, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6. Rose, reverse dive, piked.
6, 6, 6, 4.5, 6. Sophie, reverse dive, piked.
3.5, 5, 4, 4, 5.5. Amy, back dive, piked.
5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Poppy, forward, 1.5, somersaults, piked.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Ruby, inward dive, piked.
5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Hannah, back dive, piked.
6, 7, 5.5, 6, 6. Anna, back dive, piked.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 4, 4. Hannah, back dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 6. Scarlett, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
4.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5. Sophia, inward dive, piked.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Emma, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Eva, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5. Dimane, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Poppy, forward dive, piked. 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5, 6.5.
3.5, 5, 4, 3.5, 4.
Artesina, forward dive, piked.
Isabel, back dive, piked.
5, 4, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Sophie, back dive, piked.
4, 4, 4, 4, 3.5. Quinn, reverse dive, piked.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 6. Georgina, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5. Anna, reverse dive with tuck.
4, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4. Daisy, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
1.5, 3, 2, 2, 2. Imogen, back dive, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Jade, forward dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Tegan, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5. Amelia, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
7, 8, 7, 7.5, 7.5.
5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5.
Tilly, back dive, piked.
Toby, reverse dive, piked.
5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half.
5, 5, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half.
Maddie, back dive, piked.
Erin, back dive, piked.
Four, 4, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half.
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 6.
Chloe, reverse dive, piked.
Round 3 on 3 meters. Elizabeth, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
7 and a half, 7, 6 and a half, 7, 6 and a half.
5, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 5.
Abby, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Regan, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4 and a half, 5, 4, 4 and a half, 4 and a half.
4, 4, 4 and a half, 4, 4.
Eva, back dive, piked.
Maya, reverse dive, piked.
7, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 6 and a half. Jessica, reverse dive, piked.
7, 6, 6 and a half, 6, 6. Martha, reverse dive, piked.
5 and a half, 5, 6, 5 and a half, 6. Claire, reverse dive, piked.
4, 3 and a half, 4, 3 and a half, 4. Emily, back dive, piked.
5, 6, 5 and a half, 6, 5 and a half. On to round 4 on 1 meter. Sophia, reverse dive, piked.
5, 6, 5 and a half, 6, 5. Elodie, back dive, piked.
'Ailey, reverse dive, piked.
6, 6, 6, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Lana, back dive, piked.
5, 5 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5. Lacey May, reverse somersault with tuck.
6, 4, 5, 5, 5.
4, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5, 5.
Annabelle, reverse dive, piked.
Hannah, back dive, piked.
5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Poppy, reverse dive, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5. Delphina, reverse dive, piked.
3.5, 2.5, 3.5, 3, 4.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5, 6.
Jasmine, back dive, piked.
Sky, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5, 4.
5.5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Kayla, back dive, piked.
Zara, reverse dive, piked. 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Erin, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 4, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Rain, reverse dive, piked.
2.5, 2.5, 2, 3, 2.5. Rose, back dive, piked.
4.5, 4, 4, 4, 4. Jess, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 6, 7, 6, 7. Amy, reverse dive, piked.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 5, 5.5. Evie, reverse dive, piked.
4.5, 5, 4, 4.5, 5. Ruby, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 4.5, 4, 5, 5.5.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5.
Lois, reverse dive, piked.
Anna, reverse dive, piked. 6, 7, 6, 6, 6.5.
6, 6.5, 7.5, 6, 6.
Scarlett, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Lexi, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5.
5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5.
Emma, reverse dive, piked.
Sadie, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Demane, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Megan, back dive, piked.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Isabel, reverse dive, piked.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 5. Isla Grace, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
3, 4, 4, 4, 4. Quinn, inward dive, piked.
6, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Naya, back dive, piked.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6. Anna, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Samantha, reverse dive, piked.
2, 2, 1.5, 1.5, 2.5. Imogen, reverse dive, piked.
5, 4, 3.5, 4, 5. Sophie, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. Tegan, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Poppy, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
7, 7.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Tilly, reverse dive, piked.
5, 4, 5.5, 4, 5.5.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Hannah, reverse dive with tuck.
Maddie, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Hannah, reverse dive, piked.
1.5, 3.5, 1.5, 2.5, 2.5. Chloe, inward dive, piked.
4.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4. Sophia, back dive, piked.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 8, 7.5.
5, 5, 6, 5, 5.5.
Abby, reverse dive, piked.
Eva, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Eva, reverse dive, piped.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 5, 5.5. Poppy, back dive, piked.
6, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Jessica, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Artesina, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Claire, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Sophie, reverse dive, piked.
4.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.
3, 2.5, 3.5, 3, 3.
And on to round 5 on 1 metre. Sophia, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Georgina, reverse dive, piked.
1.5, 4, 2, 2, 2.
4.5, 4, 4.5, 4, 4.
Ailey, back somersault, half twist, free position.
Daisy, back dive, piked. 5.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Jade, back dive, piked.
4, 5, 4, 5, 4. Lacey May, back dive, half twist, straight.
5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Amelia, reverse dive, piked.
4, 4.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4. Hannah, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
3, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4. Toby, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
3.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4. Delphina, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 4. Erin, reverse dive, piked.
4.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5. Sky, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 4.5. Round 4 on 3 meters. Elizabeth, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Zara, back somersault, half twist, free position.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Regan, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Three and a half, 5, 5, 4.5.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5.
Erin, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Maya, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4.5, 4, 5.5, 4, 5. Rose, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 7, 6, 5, 5.5. Martha, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.
3.5, 2, 3, 3, 3.
Amy, back somersault, half twist, free position.
Emily, forward 1.5 somersaults, height. 5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5. Elodie, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
3.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4. Ruby, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
4, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Lana, reverse dive, pikes.
4, 4.5, 4, 4, 3.5. Anna, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 5. Annabelle, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
2, 2.5, 2, 3, 2. Scarlett, reverse dive, piked.
5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Poppy, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
6.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Emma, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 6, 5, 5.5, 6. Jasmine, reverse dive, piked.
3.5, 4.5, 5, 3, 5. Dimani, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Kayla, reverse dive piked.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5.
4.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 4.
Isabel, forward somersault, 1 twist, free position.
Rain, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Quinn, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5, 6, 5, 5.5, 4. Jess, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
2.5, 4, 3, 3, 3. Anna, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5, 4.5, 5, 5, 5. Evie, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
3, 3.5, 3.5, 3, 3. Imogen, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Lois, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4, 4, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Tegan, forward somersault, 1 twist, free position.
5, 6.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5.
5, 6, 5, 5.5, 5.
Lexi, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Tilly, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. 5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5.
5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.
Maddie, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Sadie, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Chloe, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Megan, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Abby, forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
5.5, 5, 5, 5, 6. Isla Grace, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Eva, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
6, 4.5, 5.5, 4, 4. Naya, reverse dive, piked.
4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Jessica, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Samantha, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 4.5. Claire, back somersault, half twist, free position.
5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Sophie, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. And on to our final round of dives on 1 metre, round 6. And unfortunately, Sophia West has had to withdraw. So if we can just hold the boards until we alter our screens, thank you. Okay. And our next diver, Ailey Cow. Forward, Ailey Cow, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
Scores for Sophie, 4, 3.5, 4, 4, 4. Poppy, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Lacey May, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
5, 6, 5.5, 6, 4.5. Hannah, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.
4, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.
Hannah, forward double somersault with tuck.
Hannah, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. 4.5, 4, 4, 3, 4. Sophia, reverse dive with tuck.
3.5, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 3.5.
4, 3.5, 3, 3.5, 3.5.
Delphina, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Eva, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 4, 5, 5, 4.5. Sky, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Poppy, reverse dive, piked.
2.5, 3.5, 2, 3, 3. Zara, forward double somersault with tuck.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Artesino, reverse dive piked.
4, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 5. Erin, back 1.5 somersaults pike.
3.5, 3.5, 3, 3, 3. Sophie, inward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4. Correction. 4, 5, 4, 3.5, 4.5. Rose, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Georgina, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Amy, forward double somersault piked.
5, 6, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Daisy, reverse dive, piked.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 5, 5. Ruby, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4. Jade's reverse dive, piked.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Anna, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 6. Amelia, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Scarlett, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 4.5, 4, 4, 5. Toby, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
6.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Emma, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Erin, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Dimani, back 1.5 somersaults piked.
4.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5. There will now be a 5-minute break in the 3-meter competition.
Three and a half, 4, 4, 4. Isabel, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 3.5, 4, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. Quinn, forward double somersault with tuck. Three and a half, 4, 4, 5. Anna, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Three and a half, 4, 3, 4, 4.5. Imogen, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Five, 4, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Tegan, inward 1.5 somersaults piked. Six and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Tilly, back 1.5 somersaults piked. Six, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Maddie, back 1.5 somersaults piked. Three and a half, 3, 3, 4, 4.5. Chloe, inward 1.5 somersaults piked. Five and a half, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Abbey, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Four, 4, 4, 4.5, 4. Eva, back 1.5 somersaults pike. Five, 4, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Jessica, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 4.5, 4.5, 6, 5. Claire, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Three and a half, 4, 4, 4.5. And on to round 7 on 1 metre. Ailey, inward somersault with tuck. Four and a half, 3, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Lacey, inward somersault pipe.
Can we have judges to seats for 3 metre, please?
4, 3, 3.5, 4, 4. Hannah, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Speak.
4.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5. Delphina, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Five and a half, 4.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Sky, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
And with the referee's permission, we'll resume on 3 metres. Thank you. Elizabeth, back 1.5 somersaults piked.
Five, 6, 5, 5, 5. Zara, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Regan, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Four, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.
Erin, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Maya, forward 2.5 somersaults piked.
1.5, 1.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2. Rose, back 1.5 somersaults pipe.
5.5, 6, 5, 5, 6. Martha, forward 2.5 somersaults piked.
3, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 4. Amy, inward 1.5 somersaults piked.
3, 3.5, 4, 4, 4. Emily, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. Three and a half, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.
3, 3.5, 2, 2, 2.
Elodie, back 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Ruby, inward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
Four and a half, 5, 4, 3.5, 4. Lana, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
4, 4, 4, 4, 3. Anna, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5.
4, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.
Annabelle, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Scarlett, reverse 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position. 5, 4, 5, 5, 5.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.
Emma, forward somersault, one twist, free position.
Poppy, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.
4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5.
Dimane, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Jasmine, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 2.5, 2.5, 2, 2.5, 2.
4, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.
Kayla, forward 2.5 somersaults, pikes.
Isabel, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
3, 2, 3, 3, 2.5. Rain, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position.
3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4.
4.5, 4.5, 2.5, 4.5, 4.5.
Quinn, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Jess, back 1.5 somersaults, pikes. 4, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5.
4.5, 4, 4, 5, 4.5.
Evie, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Anna, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Unfortunately, that was a failed dive. Imogen, back 1.5 somersaults, pike.
5.5, 5, 6, 5, 4.5. Lois, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.
4.5, 4, 5, 4.5, 5.
Lexi, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Tegan, back 1.5 somersaults, pike. 3, 4, 4.5, 4, 4.
5, 5, 5, 4, 4.
Tilly, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Sadie, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Maddie, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Megan, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
3, 2.5, 1.5, 3.5, 1.5. Chloe, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5. Isla Grace, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 5, 4.5. Abby, forward double somersault, pike.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Naya, back 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Eva, forward double somersault, pike.
3.5, 3, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. Samantha, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Jessica, forward double somersault, pike.
6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 4.5. Sophie, back 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4, 4, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Claire, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Poppy, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
3.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4. And on to our final round of dives on 1 metre, round 8. Ailico, Sandwell Diving Club, back somersault with tuck.
5, 6, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Hannah, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
4, 4.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Lacey May Patterson, Manchester Aquatic Centre, forward somersault, 1 twist, free position.
5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5. Hannah, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 3.5. Hannah Ashdown, Albatross Diving Club Reading, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
1, half, 1.5, half, 0.
5, 4, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5.
Sophia, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Delphina Thomas, Tunbridge Wells Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
'll re-announce Sophia, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 4, 5, 5, 5. Skylarks, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Eva, reverse 1.5 somersaults, piked.
3.5, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 3.5. Sarah Palmer, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
2.5, 4.5, 3, 3, 3. Poppy, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
3.5, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 4. Erin Healy, Plymouth Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
5.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 6. Artesina, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 5, 5, 5, 4.
6, 6.5, 6, 6, 5.5.
Rose McCabe, Plymouth Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Sophie, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. 4.5, 3.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5.
3.5, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 3.5.
Georgina, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Amy Robertson, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward somersault, 1 twist, free position. Four, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.
4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5.
Ruby Taylor Ross, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Daisy, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Three and a half, 3.5, 4, 4, 3.5.
3, 3.5, 3, 2, 2.5.
Anna Fisher, City of Bradford Esprit Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, pack.
Jade, forward 1.5 somersaults pint. Six, 6.5, 5.5, 6. Amelia, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 4, 4, 4, 3.5. Scarlett Hallam, Decorum Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 5, 4, 5, 4.5.
6, 5, 6, 5.5, 5.
Toby, back 1.5 somersaults pint.
Emma Buckley, Amersham Swimming Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 4, 4, 4, 5, 4.
5, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.
Dimani Washington Scott, City of Sheffield Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pipe.
Erin, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position.
3, 3.5, 3, 3.5, 3.5. Isabel Geary, Southampton Diving Academy, forward double somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5. And we're on to round 6. Elizabeth, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4, 3.5, 3.5, 3, 4.5. Queen Kettler, Dive London Aquatics Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 3.5, 2.5, 3, 3. Regan, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 4, 5, 5, 4.5.
4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.
Anna Duthie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Maya, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Six, 4.5, 5, 6, 5. Imogen Fitzsimmons, Southampton Diving Academy, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five and a half, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Martha, back 1.5 somersaults, piked.
2, 3, 1.5, 1.5, 3. Tegan Fuchs, Star Diving Club Guildford, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
One, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 2.
5, 5, 5.5, 6, 5.5.
Emily, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Tilly Rollinson, Decorum Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Three and a half, 5, 4, 5, 5.
4.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5.
Elodie, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Maddie Elliott, Plymouth Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Five and a half, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.5.
3.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.
Lana, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Chloe Strutt, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Four, 3, 3, 3.5, 2. Annabelle, back 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 5, 5, 6, 6. Abby Hindle, City of Bradford Esprit Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Four and a half, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 6. Poppy, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Eva O'Reilly, Star Diving Club Guildford, inward 1.5 somersaults piked. 5.5, 4, 5.5, 5, 5. Jessica Island, City of Sheffield Diving Club, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
2.5, 4, 2.5, 2.5, 3. Jasmine, inwards, 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Claire Kettler, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward double somersault with tuck.
5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5. Kayla, inward, 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 6.5, 6, 5. Thank you, divers, coaches, team managers, officials, and volunteers. That concludes the session of the Go Cardless Swim England National Age Group Championships for the female Group A 1 metre event. We will have those results for you shortly.
Two, 3, 3.5, 4, 4. Rain, forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked. 5, 5.5, 4.5, 4, 5.5. Jess, forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked. 4.5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Evie, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. 6, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Lois, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. 5, 6, 5, 5, 6. Lexi, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 3.5, 3.5, 3, 3, 2.5. Sadie, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. 6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Megan, inward double somersaults with tuck. 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 3.5. Isla Grace, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 5.5, 3.5, 5.5, 5.5. Naya, inward double somersault with tuck. 5, 5, 4.5, 4, 3. Samantha, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. 5.5, 6, 4.5, 6, 5. Sophie, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 2.5, 3.5, 3, 3, 2. Poppy, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 6. Hannah, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 5.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Hannah, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. 3.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 4. Sophia back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position. 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5. Eva back 1.5 somersaults, piked. 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4. Poppy, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 4, 4, 3, 3.5, 3.5. Artesina, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked. 4.5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Sophie, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5. Georgina, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 2.5, 4, 2.5, 2.5, 4.5. Daisy, inward double somersaults with tuck. 5, 5, 5, 5, 3.5. Jade, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 3, 3.5, 3, 2, 3. Amelia, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4.5, 5, 4, 4, 4.5. Toby, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. Five, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 3.5. Erin, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Four, 4, 4, 3.5, 3.5. And we're on to our 7th and final round. Elizabeth Marshall, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5. Regan Raffeld, Southend Diving, inward double somersaults with tuck. Five, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Maya Richards, Dive London Aquatics Club. Back 1.5 somersaults piked. Four and a half, 4, 3.5, 4, 4. Martha Ticehurst, Plymouth Diving Club, inward double somersaults with tuck. Four and a half, 5, 5, 5.5, 4. Emily Anstis, Southend Diving, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five, 5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Elodie Bigham, Decorum Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 4-3, 2.5, 2.5, 4.5. Lana Cooper, Southampton Diving Academy, forward 2.5, somersaults, pikes. Three, 3.5, 3, 3, 3. Annabelle Bostock, Aberdeen Diving Club, forward 2.5, somersaults with tuck. 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Poppy Rice, forward 1.5, somersaults, 1 twist, free position. Five, 5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Jasmine Oral, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 1.5, somersaults with tuck. 2.5, 3, 2, 2, 3.5. Kayla Seagans, Southampton Diving Academy, back 1.5, somersaults with tuck. 2, 3, 2.5, 2, 2. Rain Downer, Southend Diving, back 1.5, somersaults, pikes. 4, 4, 4, 3, 3. Jess Wilson, Edinburgh Diving Club, inward 2.5, somersaults with tuck. 1, 2.5, 2, 2, 2.5. Evie Royal, Plymouth Diving Club, forward 2.5, somersaults, pikes. 4.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 5.5. Lowest fell Cohen, South End diving, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Five and a half, 6.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Lexi Davis, Plymouth Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. Six, 6.5, 5, 4, 5.5. Sadie Stratford, South End Diving, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Six, 6.5, 5.5, 5, 6. Megan Norton, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. 2.5, 3.5, 3, 1.5, 2.5. Isla Grace Henderson, Edinburgh Diving Club, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 3, 4, 4, 3, 4. Naya Sogert, Albatross Diving Club Reading, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 4, 5, 4.5, 3, 4. Samantha Barr, Southampton Diving Academy, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. 4, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. Sophie Neculi, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5. Poppy Reed, Edinburgh Diving Club, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 2.5, 3.5, 3, 2.5, 1.5. Hannah Hopkinson, Amersham Swimming Club, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. Six, 6.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Hannah Chung, Southampton Diving Academy, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint. Four and a half, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4. Sophia Cranton Crow, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five and a half, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Eva Lang, Plymouth Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. That was a restarted dive. Judges will score the dive out of 10, and a 2-point deduction will be made for the restart. 2.5, 3.5, 3, 1.5, 3.5. Poppy Jones, Plymouth Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint. Five and a half, 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Artesina Contopoulou, Sandwell Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position. Six, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Sophie Yaminsky, Decorum Diving Club, inward dive, pint. Five and a half, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Georgina Seath, Tunbridge Wells Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Daisy Dennison, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5. Jade Hendry, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked. 5, 3, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. Amelia Leslie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked. 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Toby Fayomi, Cambridge Dive Team, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 3.5, 4. And finally, Erin O'Neill, Southend Diving, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4.5, 6, 5, 5, 5. Thank you, divers, coaches, team managers, officials and volunteers. That concludes this session of the Go Cardless Swim England Diving National Age Groups 2024. And can we remind athletes that there is to be no mobile phone